and eat them all and get ready for like a heavy glute day. That's what I'm gonna do. Vegan, of course vegan, oatmeal raisin chocolate chip cookies that I love. I have at least once a week. Well, I bake once a week and I have like 20 of them once a week. They're so good. They're gluten-free, they're overt fat-free, they're refined fat-free, and they're technically refined sugar-free as well, unless you consider maple syrup refined sugar. But if not, then they're refined sugar-free as well. So let's just get started and preheat our ovens to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which it already is like up there because I'm dehydrating some sweet potatoes for the dogs, but now I have to go take those out and up the temperature a bit. In a bowl, I'm first going to start off by mixing all of the liquids. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, if you also consider coconut sugar refined sugar, which I guess it is because it's not a whole plant food anymore, even though it still has some of the minerals intact, it still technically is a refined sugar, but there's only like 2 tablespoons in the recipe, so it's not that bad comparatively to the majority of cookies that we love. But these are so good. I'm telling you, you have to make them with me. Let's make them together in this video. Obnoxious, that's me. Starting off, we first need some coconut sugar. This recipe is actually inspired by Medical Medium's Oatmeal Raisin cookie recipe, which from the get-go, I never actually followed. I always just modified it. And what I did instead of the coconut oil is that I substituted it with applesauce. And also the applesauce is a great replacement for the flax egg that is also in the recipe. Technically for the oil and for the flax seeds and water, which is the flax egg. I am going to be using applesauce because this just, I don't know, it works. It's so perfect. I mean, I've never actually tried the recipe the way that it actually is supposed to be, but this is my version of it. I'm telling you, it is so good. Basically, all we need is 1/4 cup of applesauce. Also, as for the applesauce that I'm using, it is unsweetened and it is just organic apple puree. There's nothing else in it. Super simple, and it's also non-GMO. You can get it at Whole Foods. It's their Whole Foods brand. It's a lot more affordable than other brands that Whole Foods carries. So before you get steered away from Whole Foods because it's deemed as expensive, it can be, definitely. Their 365 brand, I believe, is all non-GMO and can be organic or non-organic, especially like the frozen fruit, for example. You have the choice between the two, and it is so much more affordable than the majority of brands that they do carry, which is typically what I stick with when I do shop at Whole Foods. Now I need 1/3 of a cup. Is that proper? Like, is that how people like say it? 1/3 cup of, that's right, 1/3 cup of maple syrup. And this maple syrup, again, is the 365 brand, but it's maple syrup, so it's going to be expensive regardless. We're preheated. I gotta get every single drop maple syrup in there because honestly this stuff is, it gets expensive. But if you were to buy corn syrup with maple flavor, which is actually MSG, yeah, it's a lot more affordable, but unfortunately that is so unhealthy for us. The best thing to do is just to get actual maple syrup. Now we want 2 tablespoons of coconut sugar, and unfortunately I don't get my coconut sugar in bulk. Whole Foods does have it in bulk every so often. You can find coconut sugar at like almost every single grocery store. Even if you can't find it at your local grocery store, order it online. It's everywhere online. Thrive Market, Amazon, all over the town. That is the internet. The internet is just one big town. It is hot in here. I'm gonna turn on the fan. I'll put all the measurements in the description box below, but if you didn't catch it, there's 1/4 cup of applesauce, 1/3 cup of maple syrup, and 2 tablespoons of coconut sugar, and I'm just going to mix everything together until it becomes one liquid and the coconut sugar completely dissolves. I gotta put this away. This is overwhelming. Now I need to grab some oats and some baking powder and baking soda. This is another thing that I modify when it comes to Anthony's recipe. Basically, his recipe calls for 1 1/2 cups of gluten-free rolled oats, along with 1 cup of gluten-free oat flour. And what I'll sometimes do is I'll swap the two. Instead of doing 1 cup of oat flour, I'll do 1 cup and a half of oat flour. Along with that, instead of 1 1/2 cups of oats, I'll just do 1 cup of oats. And so I think today that's what I'm going to do. you, you can just experiment with that, because either way they turn out really, really good. But it just really depends on the consistency that you want and how much like whole oats that you want in there, instead of basically like ground up oats, which is what I'm gonna do today to make my oat flour. These are just oats, they're not gluten-free. Oats technically are gluten-free, but unfortunately with the way that the world just is, things blow, the wind happens, and it can be gluten contaminated even though oats are actually gluten-free. So if you actually are allergic to gluten, then definitely stay away from typical traditional oats and get certified gluten-free oats. So in my Vitamix, you can do this in any other high-powered blender. I am also just going to put like 2 cups of oats in here. Usually what I'll do is I'll just start off on the lowest speed to get it going, and then slowly work my way up to a higher speed. And then you just let it blend for like 2 minutes or so. Also, if you used your blender earlier that day, like myself with my smoothies, make sure that it's completely dry before you do this, because then the flour will stick to your blender and it will just be a whole entire mess, especially if you want to make this to store it away. You really do not want any moisture in your oat flour. Measure out 1.5 cups of oat flour. Out of those 2 cups of unground oats, I now have about half a cup of flour left over that I'm just gonna store. So basically when you do blend it, it's just like a 1-to-1 ratio of what you want. Now we're gonna add half a teaspoon of baking soda, and unfortunately I don't get this in bulk. I just took out the packaging. I took the product, I took the baking soda away from the packaging because it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. And now I'm getting another half teaspoon, but this time of baking powder. Now I'm going to add just 1 cup of oats by themselves in their whole form without being ground up. I like to lightly mix all the dry ingredients together that are just on top. And then also before I do that, I want to grab my chocolate chips and my raisins, which I am so lucky to be able to get in bulk also at Whole Foods, so that I can avoid any unnecessary packaging. Along with that, if you didn't know, chocolate is vegan. It's just a lot of products that have chocolate in them also have animal products in them as well. But chocolate itself is entirely vegan. When it comes to the measurements for the raisins and the chocolate chips, I don't typically measure, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to go in with half a cup of raisins and half a cup of chocolate chips. Also, if you wanted to skip out on the chocolate chips, you could totally do that, and on top of that, you can do 1 teaspoon of cinnamon instead of chocolate chips, and then you have like cinnamon raisin oatmeal cookies. Okay, but look at that dough. You could just eat this, just like this. This is so good, you know? This is so good. Now I'm gonna get a baking sheet, which this is, I guess, more of a baking rat. Ratburn is getting married to a guy! Anyway, which is everything. Like, thank goodness. Like, yes, making change. There's nothing inappropriate about that. You know how much, like, sexual, suggestive things that are made, and, that's not deemed as inappropriate for kids. Yet, same-sex marriages. We are going to line that baking rack, not rat, with parchment paper. I need some more. My favorite tool to scoop out cookie dough is an ice cream scooper. I am just going to squish them down, because if not, they will turn into cookie balls, which is totally fine, but I just want them to be all round and flat, like your typical. And I know I'm flattening the cookies with the fork that I had in my mouth several times, like a toddler, but that's totally okay, because these cookies are going to be entirely mine. Dogs can't have raisins, nor can they have chocolate chips, so these cookies are all for me. They're all done! Finally, I'm going to stick these in the oven for 7 minutes, and just make sure, please, don't burn yourself. Be extremely, extremely careful. But seriously, don't burn yourself. I mean, my mom wouldn't even let me have an easy bake oven because she was afraid that I would burn myself on the light bulb. So now, since my mom deprived me of an easy bake oven in my childhood, I want one now. And that's sad. I mean, that's not sad to like want to play with like fun things like that, but like I don't want it, but like I want it. Like I want the experience, but I don't want it. Like I don't want to get an easy bake oven. I don't want to bring that into my life. So unnecessary for me, but I still feel like I want that experience. And I went over to a friend's house. We made a cake. in her Easy Bake Oven. Oh my god, this is such a weird thing to talk about. We made a cake in her Easy Bake Oven, and I just didn't get the full experience of doing it at my house by myself, baking as a child. I have to dump these all back in their container glass. Container glass. Cluck, 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 cluck. I'm gonna let them sit for a little bit and set and cool down and clean while that happens, and then I'll be right back. I would say that these cookies are even better the next day. They just are more solid, but they're not dry at all. They just become themselves. I hope you had fun making these oatmeal raisin chocolate chip cookies with me. These are so good. I mean, I can't say it enough. I'm obsessed. Let me know if you try out this recipe, make them along with me. We can do a little baking moment in the afternoon, a Friday afternoon, instead of going out. We bake. I'm gonna go eat these cookies. Actually, no, I'm gonna eat them tomorrow when they taste even better the next day. Kind of like cold pizza, but not. I found the perfect mukbang angle, and I'm cutting off my body. I just have to take advantage of it and just do a little moment, you know? Mm-hmm.